Hello friends, welcome to Insomniac History tonight. We are talking about creatures whose very shadows were considered sacred, whose purrs echoed with the whispers of deities, and whose lives were valued, in many ways above those of humans. Tonight, let the desert wind sing a lullaby of ancient reverence. The mists of Starry drift back, not to a single year but to an age, stretching over 3 millennia across the sun, drenched plains and fertile banks of the Nile. Here, beneath the unwavering gaze of Ra, the land of the Pharaohs breathed life into colossal monuments, intricate mythologies, and a devotion to the feline form that remains, even today, almost incomprehensible in its intensity. This isn't merely a tale of pets and their devoted owners. It is a profound exploration into the heart of a civilization that saw the divine reflected in the emerald eyes of a cat. A civilization where a creature of comfort became a beacon of cosmic order, protected by laws more stringent than those governing many human lives. Imagine, if you will, the bustling streets of Memphis or Thebes, the air thick with the scent of spices, dust, and the earthy aroma of the Nile. Hieroglyphs adorn every surface, telling stories of gods and kings, battles and harvests, but woven into this tapestry of human endeavor. Gliding silently through markets, basking on sun-warmed thresholds, or curled regalie on the laps of nobles, were the cats. They were ubiquitous, yet never mundane. Each sleek, muscular form, each flick of a tail, each piercing gaze seemed to carry a weight of meaning, a silent testament to their unique place in the Egyptian cosmos. At first, their presence was practical. The granaries, overflowing with the bounty of the Nile's annual flood, were irresistible magnets for rodents, and where rodents gathered, cats followed. These agile hunters, with their keen senses and silent approach, were invaluable guardians of the precious food supply, protectors against famine and disease. The Egyptians, a pragmatic people deeply connected to the cycles of nature, surely observed this utility with grateful eyes, but gratitude, in this mystical land, often blossomed into something far more profound. They watched the cats. They saw their effortless grace, their fluid movements, their fierce independence mingled with moments of surprising affection. They observed their mysterious night vision, their ability to navigate the darkness with an uncanny certainty, their silent pounces, their sudden explosive energy. These qualities, combined with their prolific fertility, began to resonate with deeper currents in the Egyptian psyche. They were creatures of duality, fierce hunters, yet gentle companions, solitary, yet often found in family groups. They embodied contrasts. Just as the Nile brought both life and destructive flood, just as the sun brought both warmth and scorching heat, it wasn't long before these observations transcended the mundane and brushed against the divine. The cat's watchful eyes were likened to the all-seeing eye of Ra, the sun god. Its protective instincts against dangerous snakes and scorpions linked it to the very forces that safeguarded Egypt from chaos. And its fertility, its ability to bring forth new life, connected it directly to the cycles of renewal and regeneration that defined Egyptian existence. Thus, the common cat began its ascent to godhood, culminating in its iconic association with Bastet, the goddess of home, fertility, joy, and protection. Bastet, often depicted with the head of a lioness or a domestic cat, embodied the milder, nurturing aspects of feline nature. A counterpart to the fierce lioness goddess Sekhmet, her cult center, Bubastis, became a site of immense pilgrimage, a city where cats roamed freely, revered and cared for as living embodiments of the goddess herself. Thousands of cat mummies have been unearthed there, each lovingly prepared, each a testament to the depth of this devotion. To harm a cat, even accidentally, was to invite the wrath of the gods, and often the swift and brutal hand of human justice. The punishment for killing a cat was death, a sentence enforced with chilling regularity and fervor. Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian, recounts an incident where a Roman soldier inadvertently killed a cat, igniting a riot among the Egyptian populace, who, despite the pharaoh's pleas and the fear of Roman reprisal, tore the soldier limb from limb. Such was the intensity of their belief. This reverence permeated every stratum of society. When a beloved feline companion passed away, families would plunge into deep mourning, shaving their eyebrows as a public display of grief. The cat would be carefully mummified, its tiny body wrapped in linen, sometimes adorned with precious jewelry, and buried in elaborate cemeteries alongside other revered felines, or even with their human families, ensuring their passage to the afterlife. Amulets depicting cats were worn for protection and good fortune. Their images carved into tombs and temples, their graceful forms immortalized in bronze and wood. But what was it about these creatures that inspired such an extraordinary, all-consuming devotion? Was it merely their utility, or their elegance, or their perceived connection to the divine? Or was there something deeper, a profound psychological resonance that spoke to the very soul of ancient Egypt? They saw in the cat not just an animal, but a living enigma, a bridge between the earthly and the ethereal, a silent guardian whose very presence warded off evil, and they would go to truly astonishing lengths to protect this sacred bond. Lengths that would, in time, become a vulnerability, a crucial fateful weakness that even the most formidable empire would learn to exploit. The scent of papyrus and drying mud bricks clung to the air of ancient Egypt, a constant earthy perfume beneath the relentless sun. Yet, in the cool, shaded interiors of their homes, another presence often held sway, a silken, purring shadow that moved with an almost ethereal grace. This was the domestic cat, not merely a pet, but a living embodiment, a sacred vessel, through which the goddess Bastet herself was believed to manifest. Bastet. Her name whispered through the reeds and echoed within the stone halls, a melody of protection and vibrant life. Sometimes she was depicted with the fierce, unyielding head of a lioness, a symbol of divine wrath, a guardian against the darkness that threatened hearth and home. In this guise, she was a protector. Her gaze steady, her muscles coiled, ready to strike down pestilence and malevolence. But more often, as the centuries unfolded, she softened, her leonine ferocity gentling into the elegant, watchful head of the domestic cat. It was in this form that she truly captured the hearts of the Egyptians, becoming the patroness of joy, music, dance, fertility, and the tender intimacy of family. Her cult centered in the city of Bubastis, a name that hummed with the very essence of her being. Here, amidst towering temples and bustling markets, thousands would gather for her annual festival, a spectacle unlike any other in the ancient world. The air would thicken with the sweet, cloying smoke of incense and the intoxicating aroma of wine. Sistrums, those shimmering, rattling instruments, would create a rhythmic clangor, a joyful cacophony that urged on the dancers and singers. Boats, packed to the gunwales with devotees, would drift along the Nile, their passengers shouting and singing, praising the goddess who brought them such abundance and mirth. It was a time of unbridled celebration, a release from the daily toil, a testament to the profound connection between the divine and the everyday pleasures of existence. For in Bastet, the Egyptians found a deity who understood the simple, profound happiness of a well-fed child, a fertile harvest, the warmth of a fire, and the gentle companionship of a feline curled on a lap. Touch a cat. To stroke its velvety fur was to touch a fragment of the divine. They were not merely house pets, they were guardians of the granaries, sleek hunters that kept the mice and snakes at bay, preserving the very sustenance of the kingdom. This practical utility, however, was quickly overshadowed by their spiritual significance. A cat's watchful eyes, gleaming in the twilight, seemed to hold ancient secrets, a wisdom beyond human comprehension. Their independence, their quiet dignity, their sudden bursts of playful energy, all these qualities resonated deeply with the Egyptian psyche, painting them as creatures of balance, embodying both wildness and domesticity, protection and comfort. In every home, from the humblest mud-brick dwelling to the opulent palaces of the Pharaohs, cats were cherished members of the family. They reclined on cushions, shared meals, and their presence was a silent blessing, a ward against malevolent spirits. When a beloved feline passed from this world, the grief was profound, mirroring the loss of a human child. Families would shave their eyebrows as a sign of mourning, a visible declaration of their sorrow. The deceased cat would often be mummified, carefully wrapped in linen bandages, their tiny bodies prepared with the same reverence afforded to humans, sometimes even interred with bowls of milk and mummified mice, provisions for their journey to the afterlife, where they would, no doubt, find their way back to Bastet. Thousands upon thousands of these cat mummies, unearthed in vast necropolises dedicated to Bastet, speak volumes of this unparalleled devotion, a testament etched in eternity to a love that transcended life and death. This intricate web of devotion, weaving together the mundane and the miraculous, created a society where a cat's life was protected by the strictest of laws. To intentionally harm a cat, even accidentally cause its death, was a crime punishable by the ultimate penalty, death. Such was the sanctity of these creatures. Such was the fear of incurring divine wrath that even the most hardened criminal hesitated before raising a hand against a feline. This unwavering reverence, this profound belief that the very spirit of Egypt's protective goddess resided within these purring creatures, became a cornerstone of their identity, an unshakable truth. Yet, within this very strength, this beautiful, unyielding devotion, lay a nascent vulnerability. For what happens when the object of such profound reverence, such sacred protection, becomes a weapon? What happens when an enemy, shrewd and ruthless, understands the delicate threads that bind a civilization to its gods and finds a way to unravel them? Not with swords and arrows, but with the very symbols of their faith. The land of the Pharaohs, so confident in its divine guardians, was about to discover that the purest love, when twisted, could become the most devastating of chains. How could anyone possibly turn such a cherished, protected creature into an instrument of conquest, a silent furry key to unlocking the gates of an empire? The answer, as history would painfully reveal, was both audacious and tragically simple. The very heartbeat of ancient Egypt resonated with the rhythm of the Nile, a pulse that brought forth life and sustenance from the parched earth. And from that sustenance, particularly the grain fay, the golden bounty of wheat and barley, fay sprang the prosperity, the very existence of a civilization that would echo through millennia. These grains, meticulously cultivated and harvested, represented not merely food, but wealth, power, and stability. They filled the vast, cool depths of monumental granaries, towering silos of baked mud brick, carefully sealed against the elements, standing like sentinels across the land. Within these echoing chambers, beneath roofs of palm and thatch, lay the stored dreams of the pharaohs, the daily bread of every family, the very promise of tomorrow. But even the most formidable granary, with its thick walls and heavy doors, held a vulnerability, a silent, insidious threat that slithered and scurried through the dim light. Rodents fey fat, bold rats and nimble, multiplying mice fey were a constant, devastating plague. They gnawed through sacks, contaminated stores with their droppings, and consumed mountains of precious grain, turning potential abundance into scarcity, and scarcity into the chilling specter of famine. And where there were rodents, there were often their predators, snakes, cobras, vipers, and other venomous serpents, drawn by the easy prey, would coil in the shadows, adding a deadly peril to the already dire problem of infestation. A single bite could fell a granary worker, turning the vital task of managing the nation's larder into a dangerous gamble. Imagine the anxiety that must have rippled through a community as the harvest, once painstakingly brought in, began to diminish, not through human consumption, but by the relentless, unseen maw of vermin. Picture the despair etched on a farmer's face as he pulled open a storage jar, only to find it riddled with holes, the grain within a mere husk, tainted and spoiled. The air in these granaries, usually thick with the sweet, dry scent of stored sustenance, could become tinged with the musty odor of decay. The unsettling rustle of unseen movement, a constant, unwelcome companion. It was into this fraught landscape that the cat, with its silent tread and emerald gaze, first stepped as more than a wild creature of the desert. Perhaps it was a chance encounter, A curious observer watching a nimble feline stalk and dispatch a rat with effortless precision near the edge of a village, or perhaps drawn by the plentiful prey. A stray began to frequent the outskirts of a granary, its presence noted by the watchful guardians. What must have struck the ancient Egyptians was the sheer surgical efficiency of the hunt. Unlike other predators, often noisy or indiscriminate, the cat moved with an almost ethereal grace, its senses perfectly attuned to the slightest tremor, the faintest squeak. It was a living, breathing, utterly relentless pest control system, requiring no payment save shelter and perhaps a respectful offering of water. As the centuries unfurled, the role of these feline guardians became unequivocally clear. Where cats roamed, rats feared to tread. Where their sleek forms patrolled the stone floors, the slithering menace of snakes receded. The granaries, once battlegrounds against invisible enemies, began to flourish, their stores intact, their promise fulfilled. The farmers, the priests, the pharaohs themselves began to see these creatures not merely as animals, but as something more profound. They were protectors, silent sentinels, whose very presence averted disaster. They preserved the nation's wealth, safeguarded its health, and ensured the continuity of life. The soft purr of a cat, resting amidst sacks of grain, became a lullaby of security, a testament to the wisdom of embracing these mysterious hunters. The gratitude deepened into reverence, and reverence into something approaching worship. The cat became a living embodiment of the divine protection that blessed Egypt, a tangible link to the forces that preserved their fragile existence in a harsh world. This profound connection, born of necessity and gratitude, would soon elevate them beyond mere utility. For these whiskered guardians of the harvest, capable of saving a nation from starvation, were to be considered inviolable. To lay a hand on one, even accidentally, was to invite not just the ire of the people, but the terrifying wrath of the gods themselves. And for a human to intentionally harm one of these sacred creatures, well, that was a transgression for which there could be only one final and utterly absolute punishment. Even within the humblest abodes along the Nile, where the sun beat down relentlessly on mud brick walls, there was a quiet, almost regal presence. It was the feline. She moved with a liquid ease, a silent poetry in every stretched limb and languid roll. Her muscles rippled beneath a sleek coat, a testament to an inner strength held in reserve, only unleashed in a sudden breathtaking pounce on a scurrying mouse. This inherent elegance, this effortless command of space, spoke to the Egyptian soul of Pharaohs. Fefe not merely physical beauty, but a profound, almost spiritual poise. She embodied the ideal of serene perfection, a creature seemingly untouched by the anxieties that plagued humanity. The Egyptians observed her, not just with affection, but with a deep, contemplative reverence. They saw in her unblinking, emerald gaze a reflection of the sun's steady light, and in her quiet vigilance the steadfast protection of the deities. When she stretched, a slow, deliberate arch of her back, it was a gesture of profound contentment, a small, perfect moment of peace in a world often fraught with the struggles of flood and famine. This grace was not just admired, it was seen as a blessing, a quality that permeated the very atmosphere of a home fortunate enough to harbor such a creature. But beyond grace, there was another, equally powerful symbolism entwined with the feline form, fertility, Fe. The cat, with her frequent litters of squirming, helpless kittens, became a living testament to abundance, to the relentless cycle of life that was so crucial to an agrarian society. A queen cat, nursing her brood in a sun-drenched corner, was a miniature tableau of prosperity. Her presence in the granaries, a silent guardian against the gnawing teeth of rodents, ensured that the vital stores of grain remained intact. In a land where the bounty of the Nile was both life and livelihood, the cat's role in protecting that bounty elevated her to a status far beyond mere pest control. She was a living charm against scarcity, a furry embodiment of the promise of tomorrow's harvest. It was no wonder, then, that the goddess Bastet, the benevolent protector of home and hearth, of women and childbirth, frequently took the form of a cat, or a woman with a cat's head, her serene gaze promising comfort and progeny. This profound observation, This almost worshipful study of their feline companions birthed an artistic tradition rich with feline imagery, statues of cats crafted from polished bronze, gleaming obsidian, or carved wood, adorned temples and homes alike. These were not mere representations. They were often imbued with a lifelike energy, their eyes inlaid with quartz or polished stone, their postures a delicate balance between alertness and repose. A bronze cat statue, often depicted sitting upright with paws neatly tucked, tail curled, and ears erect, conveyed a sense of watchful dignity, a silent sentinel against malevolent forces. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each curve and line reflecting the animal's natural elegance, testament to the deep respect held for their form. In the vibrant frescoes that decorated the walls of tombs, cats were often depicted as cherished members of the deceased's family, sitting under chairs with an owner's hand gently resting on their head, or sometimes, more majestically, hunting birds in the papyrus marshes, a symbol of the eternal hunt for joy and sustenance in the afterlife. They wore ornate collars, sometimes with bells, marking them as beloved companions rather than wild animals. Even in the intricate hieroglyphs, the elegant outline of a sitting cat could convey concepts of watchfulness, protection, and the divine. Amulets, small charms worn for protection and good fortune, frequently featured the head or full body of a cat, a tiny potent symbol clutched close to the skin, whispering promises of fertility and grace. The feline was woven into the very fabric of daily existence, not as a mere pet, but as an integral part of the spiritual and domestic landscape. Her quiet purr was a soothing balm, her sudden playful antics a source of delight. But beneath these mundane interactions lay a current of profound veneration. Each flick of a tail, each stretch in a patch of sunlight, was a confirmation of the natural order, a small, perfect miracle in miniature. To harm such a creature was not merely a crime against an animal. It was a sacrilege, an affront to the gods themselves, punishable by the gravest penalty. Yet, as the centuries turned, and the very air of Egypt became thick with the scent of myrrh and the quiet rustle of linen, wrapped mummies, a subtle shift began to occur. The lines between the sacred and the practical, between the revered and the required, began to blur. The growing devotion to Bastet and the increasing demand for mummified cats fade not just as companions for the deceased, but as offerings to the gods. Countless thousands upon thousands entombed in vast catacombs, Faye introduced a new complex dynamic. A shadow began to fall across the sun, drenched tranquility of the feline's existence, an almost imperceptible tightening of an unseen leash. For while the cat was worshipped, protected, and cherished, it was also, inadvertently, becoming a commodity, its very sacredness a burden that would one day perhaps prove too heavy to bear. The quiet purr that once signified only peace now seemed to hum with an unspoken tension. A silent question hanging in the desert air, waiting for an answer only time could provide. The sun beat down on the mud-brick labyrinth of Thebes, a relentless golden hammer pounding the city into submission. Dust fine as ground spices rose from the bustling market, mingling with the scent of roasted pigeon, sweet dates, and the sharp tang of sweat. Overhead, the sky was an indifferent, vast canvas of blue, yet beneath it, the air was thick with the silent, watchful presence of the gods, and among them, in myriad forms, walked the sacred cats. Khufu, a potter by trade, his hands permanently stained with the clay of the Nile, had been navigating the crowded thoroughfare near the temple of Ammon, his donkey laden with freshly fired amphorae. His eyes, usually keen, were fixed on a vendor haggling loudly over a stack of papyrus scrolls. It was a momentary lapse, a fleeting distraction in a life lived meticulously by the rhythm of the river and the dictates of tradition. A shadow, swift and silent as a whisper, darted from beneath a fruit stall. It was a sleek, black cat, its emerald eyes gleaming with an ancient mischief, chasing a lizard no one else had seen. There was a sickening thud, a sharp, choked cry that was not human. The donkey startled, shied, sending a pottery amphora tumbling to the dusty ground, where it shattered with a pathetic clatter. But it was not the amphora that drew the gasps, nor the donkey's whinny. It was the small, still form on the sun-baked earth, a patch of glossy black fur, ominously unmoving. The lizard, forgotten, scuttled away into the shadows. A silence, sudden and absolute, descended upon the market. The haggling ceased. The cries of vendors died in their throats. Every eye, wide with a mixture of horror and grim fascination, turned to Khufu, who stood frozen. His face draining of blood, the clay dust on his hands suddenly feeling like a shroud. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, what he had done, or rather, what had happened. An accident. A terrible, unthinkable accident. But in the land of the two lands, the concept of accident held little sway when a creature of Bastet lay broken. The crowd, moments before a vibrant tapestry of life, transformed into a single collective entity, its mood shifting from bustling indifference to chilling condemnation. A woman, her face wrinkled like dried figs, pointed a trembling finger. "He has offended Bastet," she wailed, her voice cracking the heavy silence. Others took up the cry, a low guttural murmur that swelled into an accusatory chorus. Khufu felt the world tilt. The vibrant colors of the market blurred. The smells became cloying, suffocating. He knelt, his knees protesting on the rough earth, a desperate, futile gesture towards the motionless cat. Its fur, soft and ironically perfect even in death, offered no solace. He had not meant it, the thought echoed in his skull. Frantic and unheard, he was a devout man. He honored the gods. He revered the sacred animals. His own small household included a pampered tabby, a gift from his wife's sister, whose purr was the soundtrack to their evenings. But the law was absolute, etched into the very stones of the temples, whispered in the hushed reverence of the priests. To harm a cat, even unintentionally, was to invite the wrath of the gods and the swift, unyielding justice of men. The punishment for such an act was not a fine, not imprisonment, not even a slow, torturous death. It was simply fey death. Fey, no debate, no appeals, no mitigating circumstances. The life of a man, even an innocent man, weighed less than the sacred breath of a cat. From the temple precinct, a figure emerged, tall and imposing, clad in the pristine white linen of a priest of Sekhmet. His face was impassive. His eyes, dark as polished obsidian, swept over the scene, lingering for a moment on the dead cat, then settling with chilling finality on Khufu. He did not speak, but his presence alone was a judgment. 2 temple guards, their faces stern and unyielding beneath their ceremonial headdresses, moved forward with practiced efficiency. They laid hands on Khufu, their grip like iron bands, pulling him to his feet. He offered no resistance. What was the point? The fear that had numbed him moments before now gave way to a profound, sickening despair. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, 1,000 silent witnesses, not of his guilt, but of his fate. There was no pity in their gazes, only the cold, hard recognition of inevitable consequence. To mourn the man was to risk the gods' wrath for oneself. Better to condemn, to distance, to cleanse the community of such an affront. The procession was short, brutal in its simplicity. Khufu, flanked by the guards, was led away from the bustling market, away from the familiar scents and sounds of his life, towards the silent, foreboding shadows that clung to the rear of the temple. The crowd parted for them. A silent sea of faces, some averted, some staring with a grim, almost ritualistic solemnity. He could hear the distant murmur of the Nile, the eternal river flowing on, indifferent to the fate of one man. As they reached the heavy, unadorned stone wall behind the temple, where the sun never quite reached, the air grew cooler, heavier, thick with the scent of damp stone and something else, something metallic and final. Khufu's breath hitched. He saw the preparations, stark against the ancient stones, a priest holding a ceremonial blade, its bronze surface glinting dully in the filtered light, and a small raised block of obsidian, smooth and black as a moonless night. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, desperate for escape. He closed his eyes, picturing his wife's face, the warm glow of their hearth, the purring cat that now seemed a cruel, ironic memory. A whisper of a prayer, fragmented and desperate, formed on his lips. He heard the priest's voice, low and resonant, invoking the name of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess, goddess of vengeance. Her breath the searing desert wind, her roar the thunder. The blade was raised, casting a fleeting shadow over the dark, polished stone. And Khufu, a man who had only ever sought to live a quiet, righteous life, felt the cold touch of the inevitable approaching, not with the fire of divine fury, but with the quiet, chilling precision of a ritual. But just as the shadow of the blade began its descent, a figure emerged from the deeper gloom of the temple corridor, moving with an urgency that defied the solemnity of the moment. It was a woman, veiled and cloaked, her movements swift and purposeful, and in her arms she cradled something small and fey-moving fey. The priest paused, his arm frozen mid-air, his brow furrowed in annoyance at the interruption. The guards tensed, but the woman, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation she had just disturbed, swept past them, her gaze fixed not on Khufu, nor on the priest, but on the small dark form still lying motionless in the dusty market square. The woman moved with a strange, almost ethereal purpose, her bare feet stirring faint clouds of ochre dust as she glided past the statuesque guards. Their bronze spears, usually formidable barriers, seemed to part for her, not by command, but by the sheer, unyielding force of her singular focus. Khufu watched, a muscle in his jaw ticking, the warmth of the sun on his regalia suddenly feeling less like a blessing and more like an oppressive weight. He was a god-king, his will absolute. Yet this peasant woman, no doubt smelling of sweat and river clay, dared to ignore his very presence. Her coal-rimmed eyes, usually bright, were now pools of profound sorrow, fixed on the small, still form. She knelt, oblivious to the sharp stones and refuse of the market floor, her linen dress spreading around her like a pale fan. Her hands, calloused from work, trembled slightly as she reached out, not to touch, but to hover, as if a single wrong movement might shatter the fragile sanctity of the moment. The air, thick with the scent of spices and human toil, suddenly felt charged, hushed. Even the distant bray of a donkey seemed to hold its breath. The cat, a tabby with stripes like shadows cast by reeds, lay curled as if in sleep, save for the unnatural angle of its neck. A thin trickle of dark blood, almost black against the dust, had dried near its maw. The woman's breath hitched, a sound like a tiny broken bird, sung in the vast square. Slowly, reverently, she extended her hand, her fingers tracing the air above its tawny fur, not daring to make contact. Her gaze was not one of simple grief, but of a profound, almost spiritual connection, as if she could still feel the faint flutter of its soul near its still form. "It is a sacred messenger," she whispered, her voice surprisingly clear, though laced with an ancient, primal pain. She did not address Khufu, nor the priest, but spoke to the very air, to the gods themselves, or perhaps, to the departed spirit of the feline. It journeyed between the worlds. Now it must journey again. The priest, whose initial outrage at the cat's death had been eclipsed by the pharaoh's presence, now watched the woman with a renewed intensity. He recognized the depth of her devotion, a fervor that transcended the mere ownership of a pet. This was the devotion of a true believer in Bastet, in Sekhmet, in the very divine essence that animated these creatures. It was a devotion that he, in his own practiced piety, understood and respected, even as Khufu bristled beside him. Khufu, despite his immense power, felt a flicker of unease. He had seen this kind of grief before, not for a human, but for a cat. He had witnessed the ritual wailing, the shaving of eyebrows, the weeks of mourning. He knew the laws, etched into the very fabric of Egyptian society, that elevated these creatures to an untouchable status. But to witness such raw, unbridled sorrow from a stranger, for an animal in his very presence, was still jarring. It was a potent reminder that his divinity, while absolute over humans, bowed to a different, more ancient divinity when it came to the sacred felines. The woman finally lowered her hand, her fingertips brushing the soft fur of the cat's flank. A tear, clean and bright, tracked a path through the dust on her cheek. She did not weep openly, but her eyes spoke volumes of a grief that threatened to consume her. "It will have its journey," she repeated, her voice gaining a quiet strength, "through the embalmer's hands to the eternal fields, adorned as a king, as a god." Her words hung in the air, a silent challenge to the chaos of the market, to the power of the pharaoh, to the very concept of death itself. She spoke of practices that were reserved for the highest nobility, for the most revered figures, yet she uttered them for this small fallen creature as if it were her unquestionable right, her sacred duty. The guards, witnessing this scene, seemed to shrink back a fraction, their stern faces softening with a shared, unspoken understanding of the gravity of her intent. Khufu's scowl deepened, but it was no longer solely annoyance. There was a grudging respect there, a recognition of a faith so pure it bordered on the sublime. He knew the cost of such a mummification, the weeks of work, the expensive oils, the linen wrappings, the amulets, the elaborate coffin. It was a king's ransom, a pharaoh's burial, for a common street cat. Yet, for her, it was simply Pharaite faith. "You intend to see this done?" Khufu's voice, usually a thunderclap, was surprisingly subdued, almost a question rather than a command. The woman finally looked up, her gaze meeting Khufu's for the first time. There was no fear in her eyes, only a steadfast resolve. "It is my duty, great Pharaoh, as it is our duty to honor those who walk with Bastet." Her eyes flickered to the priest, then back to Khufu. "Every bead, every drop of myrrh, every inscription. It will be a testament to its divine essence." The priest stepped forward, his voice a low hum. "Pharaoh, her devotion is exemplary, a true daughter of Egypt." He seemed to be subtly guiding Khufu, reminding him of the sacred traditions. "The rituals for such an honoring are ancient, potent." Khufu considered this, his gaze sweeping from the woman to the inert cat to the solemn faces of his guards. He, the living God, was being reminded of the laws of the gods themselves. This was not a matter of a peasant's insolence, but a profound expression of a societal truth he himself upheld. To deny her this, to deny the cat its sacred journey, would be to invite the wrath of Bastet, to disrupt the very cosmic order that he, as pharaoh, was tasked to maintain. A sigh escaped Khufu, a soft exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of his royal duties and the burden of ancient traditions. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Let it be so," he rumbled, his voice regaining some of its authority, but tinged with a weary acceptance. "Let the rituals be performed, and let the expenses be provided." The woman's face, etched with grief, softened infinitesimally, a faint tremor passing through her. She bowed her head, a silent acknowledgment of the pharaoh's decree, but her eyes, as they returned to the small, lifeless form, still held a fierce determination. She would ensure this creature's passage, not just with the pharaoh's blessing, but with the full force of her own unwavering faith. She gently gathered the cat into her arms, cradling it as if it were a newborn child. Its fur surprisingly warm against her skin, the silence of the market square now broken only by the whispers of the wind carrying the scent of incense from a nearby temple. Her journey, and the cat's, was only just beginning. A journey that would lead not to a simple grave, but to a vast necropolis of hallowed ground, where thousands of its kind awaited their elaborate eternal sleep. But as she stood, a sudden movement at the edge of the market caught her eye. A flicker of movement, swift and shadow-like, disappearing behind a spice merchant's stall. It was too quick to be human, too agile, and it left behind a faint, almost imperceptible scent in the air, a scent that prickled at her instincts, hinting at something else, something far older and less benevolent than the grieving mother goddess. The sun, a benevolent eye in the azure, cast long, languid shadows across the courtyard of Khepri, the potter. Inside his modest home built of sun, baked brick and cool under a roof of palm fronds, life moved with the quiet rhythm of ancient days. Khepri himself, his hands perpetually stained with the earth he shaped, often found solace in the soft, persistent weight of Miyu, the family's slender, cream-furred cat, as she draped herself across his lap during the evening meal. Miyu was not merely a pet. She was a warm, breathing sentinel, a miniature goddess made manifest. Her eyes, the color of newly cut amber, seemed to hold secrets as old as the dunes that stretched beyond the city's edge. Aya, Khepri's wife, often remarked that Miyu knew their moods better than they knew their own. When the loom broke and frustration simmered, Miyu would rub against Aya's ankle, a silent offering of comfort. When their youngest, Bees, fell ill with a fever, Miyu curled herself protectively at the foot of his small reed bed, purring a constant, low thrum that seemed to chase away the worst of the boy's delirium. She was the hearth's silent guardian, the family's furry shadow, a creature whose presence wove itself seamlessly into the fabric of their daily existence, as indispensable as the Nile's fertile floods. The gentle brush of her tail against a leg, the soft kneading of her paws on a sleeping chest, the distinctive, questioning Pharaoh Faye from the doorway Faye, these were the small, precious anchors of their world. But even the most cherished of lives, even those touched by divine favor, are subject to the slow, relentless erosion of time. Miyu, once a lithe dancer among the reeds and a nimble hunter of scuttling things, began to slow. Her jumps grew hesitant, her sleep longer and deeper. The amber in her eyes seemed to cloud, and her once sleek fur, though still meticulously groomed, lost some of its vibrant sheen. The family watched, a silent dread tightening around their hearts. Khepri, with his earthy wisdom, knew the signs. Aya would spend longer moments stroking Miyu's frail back, whispering endearments into the soft fur, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. Even young Bee's understanding with the intuition of childhood would bring Miyu her favorite morsels of fish, hand, feeding her when she lacked the strength to eat on her own. The air in their home grew heavy with an unspoken understanding, a shared sorrow that permeated every corner. Then came the morning when Miyu did not greet the dawn. She lay curled on her accustomed cushion, her small body still, her breathing imperceptible. Khepri found her there, the first rays of the sun touching her fur, a final golden embrace. He knelt, his calloused hand trembling as he reached out, not to wake her, but to confirm the stillness. A quiet sigh escaped his lips, a sound heavy with a grief that resonated deep within the chest. He did not need to speak. Aya, seeing the set of his shoulders, the slump in his frame, already knew. The silence that followed was profound, deeper than any sleep. The house, usually alive with the soft sounds of a waking family, became a tomb of unspoken sorrow. The first ritual, an immediate and visceral expression of their profound loss, was the shaving of the eyebrows. Aya, her face, a mask of quiet devastation, moved to her small bronze mirror. Her hand, usually so steady with the spindle, wavered as she picked up the slender obsidian razor. The cool, sharp edge glided across her brow, removing the dark arch of hair that framed her eyes. Each stroke was a physical manifestation of the ache in her soul, a public declaration of the emptiness that now resided where Miyu's vibrant spirit had once been. Khepri followed suit, his broad hand moving with a similar solemnity. The children, wide-eyed and silent, watched their parents transform, their faces now stark, bearing the unmistakable mark of profound mourning. The absence of the brows made their eyes seem larger, more vulnerable, windows to an inconsolable grief. The household became a place of quiet lament. The usual laughter was stifled, the daily chatter hushed to whispers. Food was prepared and eaten with a somberness that spoke of a missing presence at their feet, a purr that would never again grace the air. For 70 days, the outward sign of their sorrow would remain, a visible testament to the depth of their bond with the departed Miyu. During this period, the family would prepare Miyu for her journey to the afterlife, a journey as meticulously planned and reverently undertaken as that of any human of means. Her small body, carefully wrapped in fine linen bandages, would be treated with the same sacred oils and resins that preserved the pharaohs, ensuring that her essence, her fekafe, could find its way to the field of reeds, where she might once again hunt and play in eternal sunshine. But even after the 70 days had passed, and the eyebrows slowly began to regrow, the void Miyu had left behind persisted. The sun-drenched patch by the hearth still awaited her. The soft cushion in the corner remained undisturbed. The particular way she would rub her head against Khepre's leg, or nuzzle into Aya's neck, or chase a stray beetle across the floor, these were memories that haunted the corners of their home, small persistent pangs of loss. The family had lost not just an animal, but a spirit, a protector, a cherished member whose absence altered the very rhythm of their days. Yet, as the grief began to soften around its edges, something else began to stir in the hearts of Khepri and Aya, a quiet determination, born from the profound love they had for Miyu, began to take root. They would honor her memory, not just with rituals, but with a deeper understanding of the sacred bond that tied humans to these enigmatic creatures. And it was this understanding that would, in time, lead to a custom far more widespread, far more audacious, and far more perilous than any eyebrow shaving. A custom that would bind the fate of their very civilization to the soft tread of a feline paw. The sun, a benevolent eye in the boundless Egyptian sky, slanted through the painted archways of Neferu's chambers, drawing long striped shadows across the cool tiled floor. Within this dappled light, a creature of sinuous grace named Femiu stretched languidly, her fur the color of burnished copper, catching the golden dust motes that danced in the still air. She was not merely a guardian against the scuttling things of the night, nor solely a living echo of the revered goddess Bastet. To Neferu, Miyu was the beating heart of her quiet, private world. Neferu, a noble woman of considerable standing, often found herself in the cool embrace of her inner courtyard, far from the clamor of the marketplace and the endless pronouncements of the pharaoh's court. Here, amidst the sweet scent of jasmine and the gentle murmur of the lotus pond, she would recline on soft cushions, a scribe often at her side, though more often than not, her attention would drift to the elegant form of Miyu. The cat, sensing her mistress's gaze, would sometimes offer a slow, deliberate blink, an ancient gesture of trust and profound contentment that spoke volumes without a single sound. Miyu was not merely tolerated, she was celebrated. Her sleeping mat, woven from the finest flax, lay beside Neferu's own grand bed, a privilege few humans outside of immediate family could claim. Her meals, prepared with a care usually reserved for the most honored guests, consisted of tender cuts of fish, sometimes even slivers of roasted duck, offerings that might make a common laborer's mouth water with envy. Neferu herself would often personally oversee the serving, watching with a fond smile as Miyu delicately consumed her repast. A picture of refined feline dignity, there was a particular evening ritual Neferu cherished above all others. As twilight deepened and the stars began to prick the indigo canvas above Thebes, Miyu would invariably leap onto Neferu's lap. Her weight, a comforting anchor, settled into the folds of Neferu's linen gown. A deep, resonant purr, a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very core of the earth, would begin, filling the silence of the chamber. Neferu would stroke the soft, warm fur, feeling the rhythmic thrum against her palm, a balm to the anxieties and complexities of her day. In those moments, the world outside, with its rigid hierarchies and societal pressures, faded into an indistinct hum. There was only the gentle breath of the cat, the warmth of its body, and the unspoken language of affection that transcended species. Sometimes, Miyu would bring her mistress a gift, a small, unfortunate mouse, its fate sealed by the cat's predatory instincts. Neferu, though perhaps a little squeamish, would never reprimand her. Instead, she would praise Miyu, understanding that this offering was not an act of cruelty, but a profound expression of the cat's devotion, an instinctual sharing of her bounty with the one she deemed her protector and companion. The household staff, too, understood these nuances. Miyu was never shooed away from the preparation of food, nor banished from the weaving loom where she might play with stray threads. Her whims, within reason, were indulged. Her presence a silent, comforting hum throughout the grand house. Children in the household, Neferu's younger cousins and nieces, knew to treat Miyu with the utmost reverence. They learned early that a gentle hand and a soft voice were rewarded with Miyu's presence, perhaps even a playful nip at a dangling ribbon. They would mimic her movements, giggling as they stalked imaginary prey, their innocent admiration a testament to Miyu's intrinsic charm. She was not merely a pet. She was a member of the family, her moods understood, her comfort ensured, her well-being a matter of collective concern. This deep bond extended beyond the daily pleasantries. Neferu often confided in Miyu, whispering her worries into the soft fur of the cat's head. When the weight of her responsibilities grew heavy, she spoke of the harvest, of the Pharaoh's decrees, of the whispers of intrigue that sometimes permeated the palace walls. Miyu, of course, offered no spoken counsel, but her steady presence. The rhythmic beat of her purr offered a profound sense of peace. It was as if the cat, with her ancient, knowing eyes, absorbed the turbulence, offering a silent, unjudging sanctuary. One sweltering afternoon, Miyu, usually a creature of impeccable health, seemed restless. She paced the cool floor, her tail twitching with an unusual agitation, and refused the choice morsels of fish Neferu offered. Her eyes, usually bright with intelligence, seemed clouded, and a faint tremor ran through her slender body. A wave of icy dread washed over Neferu. The thought of any harm befalling Miyu was unbearable, a possibility that tightened her chest with an ache she knew intimately from other losses, but which felt uniquely sharp now. She immediately summoned the household physician, a man whose skills were normally reserved for the most esteemed members of the family, and demanded he examine the cat with the same diligence he would offer the pharaoh's own child. The physician, accustomed to the peculiar reverence Egyptians held for their felines, approached the task with a solemn professionalism. His brow furrowed in concentration, he examined Miyu carefully, his fingers tracing her spine, listening intently to her breath. After a long, agonizing silence, he straightened, his expression grave. "My lady," he began, his voice hushed, "there is a sickness that has lately troubled the beasts of the city, a fever of the blood, swift and merciless. I fear Miyu has contracted it." Neferu's heart plummeted. The physician then explained the remedies he would attempt. A bitter concoction of herbs and prayers to Sekhmet, but his eyes held no real hope. He departed, leaving Neferu alone with her beloved Miyu, whose breathing had grown shallow. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange and mournful violet, Neferu cradled Miyu in her arms, feeling the fragile warmth of her body. The purr, usually so strong, was now a faint, broken whisper. Tears, hot and silent, traced paths down Neferu's cheeks. She knew the law: to harm a cat was death. But what was the punishment for allowing a beloved companion, a living fragment of the divine, to slip away? What was the true cost of such an irreplaceable loss to a heart that loved so deeply? She pressed her face into Miyu's fur, whispering promises of healing, of life, even as the last rays of sunlight faded, and the vast indifferent desert night began to stretch its ominous cloak across the land, bringing with it a chilling uncertainty, and a palpable sense of impending grief. The air within the temple of Bastet hung heavy and sweet, a tapestry woven from the smoke of myrrh and frankincense, the faintest whisper of lotus blossom from the offerings, and the clean, musky scent of ancient stone. Here, amidst the cool, echoing silence of limestone halls and the soft flicker of oil lamps, lived the true sovereigns of the sanctuary, the sacred cats. They moved with an unhurried grace, each step a testament to their inherent royalty, their eyes molten gold or emerald, reflecting an ancient wisdom that seemed to predate even the pyramids. The priests, shaven, headed, and robed in crisp white linen, moved among them not as masters, but as devoted servants. Their duty was not merely to feed and shelter these divine creatures, but to attend to their every whim, to interpret their subtle gestures, and to ensure their comfort was absolute. Each morning, Before the first rays of the sun pierced the eastern gate, the senior priest, Imhotep, would approach the gilded basket where the temple's most revered feline, a magnificent ginger queen named Nefer, reclined. He would kneel, his forehead touching the cool flagstones, before gently offering a small carved alabaster bowl filled with fresh Nile milk, enriched with honey and a sprinkle of sacred herbs. Nefer, with a languid stretch that rippled through her tawny fur, would deign to lap at it, her purr a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through the very stones of the temple, a sound believed to carry the blessings of Bastet herself. Life for these temple cats was an unbroken cycle of serene indulgence. They slept on cushions of finest linen, shaded from the harsh desert sun, their coats meticulously groomed by the priests with brushes of softest goat hair, often while low chants and hymns to the feline goddess filled the chamber. Their meals were delicacies, slivers of choice fish, tender game birds, rich cheeses, all prepared with ritualistic purity. But their role extended far beyond mere pampered existence. They were the living conduits to the divine, the terrestrial manifestations of Bastet's watchful eye and fertile bounty. During the grandest festivals, when the temple courtyard swelled with pilgrims, the sacred cats would be carried aloft on velvet cushions, adorned with collars of beaten gold inset with lapis lazuli and carnelian, their presence a palpable wave of sanctity that washed over the crowd. Their very movements were observed with fervent devotion. A cat stretching towards the morning sun might be interpreted as a sign of forthcoming prosperity. A sudden yawn, a prophecy of rain. Nefer, in particular, was believed to possess an uncanny sensitivity to the spiritual currents that ebbed and flowed through the land. She often lay by the central altar, her gaze fixed on something unseen, her ears twitching, her tail occasionally flicking, as if communicating with the very spirit of the temple itself. One sweltering afternoon, as the desert wind sighed through the palm trees outside, carrying with it the fine dust of the necropolis, the usual somnolence of the temple was shattered. The lesser cats, who usually draped themselves in sunbeams or stalked imaginary prey amongst the offerings, suddenly froze. Their ears swiveled, their pupils dilated into wide black pools, and a low guttural growl began to ripple through their ranks, a sound utterly alien to the gentle purrs and chirps that usually filled the sacred space. Imhotep, who had been meticulously arranging fresh flowers at the statue of Bastet, felt a chill creep up his spine. Nefer, usually the epitome of composure, sprang from her cushion, her fur bristling, her back arched high, a hiss tearing from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. Her golden eyes, normally serene, were wide and wild, fixed on the shadowed entrance to the inner sanctum, where the most sacred relics lay hidden. The other priests, startled by the sudden upheaval, looked to Imhotep, their faces etched with confusion and dawning fear. What could possibly disturb the divine calm of the temple in such a profound and primal way? What unseen presence had provoked such a potent and fearful reaction from the very embodiment of their goddess's grace and protection? The air grew thick, not with incense, but with an unfamiliar tension, a subtle, chilling vibration that promised to unravel the very fabric of their sacred world. The very air within an Egyptian home seemed to breathe differently when a cat graced its threshold. It was a subtle shift, a softening of the edges, a quiet dignity that permeated the sun-baked mud brick and the reed mats. In the bustling, vibrant households along the Nile, amidst the scent of freshly baked bread and the murmur of familial conversation, the cat moved with an undisputed grace, a silent sovereign. She was not merely a pet to be tolerated or even affectionately indulged. She was a living embodiment of the divine, a cherished extension of the family's spiritual well-being. Her meals, often a delicate portion of fish or leftover fowl, were served with a respectful care that might rival that given to a child. Her sleeping spots, often a soft cushion or a patch of sunbeam, were sacrosanct. To disturb her slumber was not merely an inconvenience, but a transgression against the household's harmonious flow. Children were taught from their earliest days to move with gentleness around these creatures, to admire their sleek forms and the serene depth of their gaze without intrusion. The purr of a contented cat was considered a blessing, a low, rumbling prayer that warded off ill fortune and whispered promises of prosperity into the very fabric of the home. Families would often adorn their beloved felines with collars of finely woven linen, sometimes embellished with a protective amulet of carnelian or lapis lazuli, mirroring the adornments they themselves might wear. To see a cat stretch languidly, its muscles rippling beneath glossy fur, was to witness a small miracle of elegance and contained power, a daily reminder of the watchful spirits that walked among them. This profound reverence extended far beyond the domestic sphere, blossoming into a vibrant, elaborate system of worship that formed an unbreakable thread in the tapestry of Egyptian society. Temples dedicated to Bastet, the benevolent lioness, headed goddess of protection, fertility, and joy, became bustling centers of devotion. Here, the air was thick with the scent of burning incense and the murmur of prayers, punctuated by the soft meows of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of sacred felines. These temple cats, tended by devoted priests and priestesses, lived lives of pampered luxury, understood to be the earthly manifestations of Bastet herself. They were living conduits through whom the goddess's blessings could flow and her protective gaze could be felt. Festivals in honor of Bastet were among the most exuberant and joyous celebrations in the Egyptian calendar. Pilgrims would flock to the city of Bubastis, Bastet's primary cult center, traveling by boat along the Nile, singing and dancing with an uninhibited abandon that belied the solemnity often associated with other deities. Here, vast quantities of wine were consumed, music played incessantly, and the air thrummed with the collective elation of a people celebrating life, fertility, and the divine feline grace that guarded their homes and their hearts. Amidst the revelry, the cats themselves were revered. Sometimes paraded in ceremonial processions, their golden eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight, their silent presence amplifying the feeling of divine communion. The sheer scale of this devotion manifested in an industry of unprecedented scope, the mummification of cats. When a beloved feline companion passed from this world, the grief that enveloped a family was profound and deeply felt. It was customary for family members to shave their eyebrows as a public display of mourning, a stark visual representation of their sorrow that could last for weeks until the hair grew back. But the mourning did not end there. Just as humans were prepared for the journey to the afterlife, so too were cats, though their purpose was often to accompany their owners or to serve as offerings to Bastet, carrying prayers to the divine realm's skilled embalmers. With steady hands and precise knowledge, would carefully preserve the feline form. The tiny bodies, wrapped in countless layers of linen bandages, were often placed in elaborate sarcophagi crafted from wood, bronze, or even precious metals, intricately decorated with feline features. These mummified cats, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions over the millennia, were then interred in vast catacombs, veritable cities of the dead dedicated solely to these sacred creatures. One could walk through endless subterranean passages, each niche filled with the silent, watchful forms of cats, their eternal rest a testament to a devotion that transcended death itself. It was an economy born of faith, a labor of love and spiritual necessity, fueling a vast network of breeders, embalmers, and artisans. This absolute reverence, however, also wove a unique and perilous thread into the fabric of Egyptian society. The law was unequivocally clear. To intentionally harm a cat was to invite the wrath of the gods and the swift, unyielding judgment of man. The punishment was death, often carried out with a grim efficiency that left no doubt as to the gravity of the transgression. It was not merely a legal decree, but an internalized societal truth, a deeply ingrained taboo. The collective horror at the thought of such an act was palpable, a chilling reminder that the line between pet and deity was gossamer thin, and to sever it was to tear at the very soul of Egypt. Wyatt. This unwavering devotion, this fierce protectiveness born of spiritual conviction, held within it a silent vulnerability. It was a strength, certainly, a unique cultural marker that set Egypt apart. But what would happen? One might wonder if this profound love, this sacred bond, were ever to be weaponized. What if an external force, recognizing the Egyptians' deep veneration for their feline companions, chose to exploit it, turning their greatest strength into their most catastrophic weakness? The whispers of such a possibility, though faint, were carried on the desert winds, destined to become a roar. And soon the ancient world would bear witness to a conflict where the sacred purr of a cat would echo with the thunder of an empire's unraveling.